How's that for crazy?
Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Even though season 2 is about halfway through for Lethal Weapon, the TV show, I finally found some time to go back and get through season 1. I had watched the pilot episode last year and a couple episodes after that, and I was really enjoying it. Usually, whenever a beloved property from the 80s gets the reboot or reimagining treatment, my experience, I think, is the same as many people's experience who experienced the original version first, grew up on it, and it's just part of their pop culture psyche. It's usually big shoes to fill, and unfortunately, it feels like most of the time the source material isn't honored, the original tone isn't carried through, and the reboot ends up being more of a reflection of the current times than the times when the original property came out. Lethal Weapon, the TV show, is a big exception though. I'm going to talk about season 1 here for a few minutes. No major spoilers though. The really interesting thing about watching this show is that I was watching it along with The Punisher on Netflix. And even though The Punisher was a pretty short run show, I was seeing so many similarities between the character of Martin Riggs and Frank Castle. Now, I think the reason the show works is because it remains true to what they did in the movies. The characters of Martin Riggs and Roger Murtaugh are very similar to how they were in the films. They don't try to reinvent the wheel. The actors don't feel like they're walking around saying, I'm going to make the character my own. No, Martin Riggs, they kept the original backstory. His wife was, she was killed, and he is unhinged. He's a loose cannon trying to deal with that. And he also has a special forces military training background. So when he does go into survival mode, instinct mode, instead of just throwing fists and screaming, much like Frank Castle, he reverts to his training, which is very deadly. But like Riggs in the movies, played by Mel Gibson, he's the fun one on the show. He's the beautiful disaster, the one who's always smiling and joking, even though he's at war with himself inside. He's struggling. He's dealing with deep, dark depression, very, very serious issues. And then there's Roger Murtaugh, who, just like Danny Glover in the movies, he's the dad. He's the family guy. But he's not the worrywart. He's not the constant paranoid, oh no, the wimp. He's not skittish. He's not a coward. He takes care of business in the show just like he did in the movies. And what I think is so great about the way Damon Wayans plays him, and the way Danny Glover played him as well, he doesn't sweat the huge stuff, especially in the show. Jumping out of a building that's exploding, jumping out of the pathway of oncoming cars that are trying to run him down, all of this chaos that ensues because of Martin Riggs, he doesn't sweat this stuff. I mean, to him, jumping out of a blowing up building is Wednesday. But the things he does sweat are the little tiny things. He sweats the little family issues going on with his son and with his daughter and with his wife. Stupid little things like bills or things to do with a house or stuff like that. And I think that's what's really entertaining about the character, that he is such a natural. He's such a cool guy. When the bullets are flying, he's all business. You know, he doesn't yelp and scream like Damon Wayans has in some previous roles. No, he's Homie the Clown, if you remember, in Living Color. Nerves of steel. But then when he's at home, that's where his ire gets raised. That's where he starts to get those heart palpitations. So I just think that's a brilliant way of playing that character. Like in the movies, Roger Murtaugh does have a serious Achilles heel. He's just had open heart surgery. He's got a pacemaker. So whenever we see Murtaugh without his shirt on, he's got this grotesque long scar. And it's a constant worry about the character. The situations that he gets placed in, he doesn't... I guess in the movies, Danny Glover worries about his health a little bit more than Damon Wayans does with the character in the show. Wayans is very cool. He plays it very cool in the show, but we always have that knowledge that he's got a bad ticker. So even though Wayans is playing it cool, like, I'm fine, don't worry about it, we know he's not. We know that that might be an issue, and they don't go all Superman with the character in the show. There are occasions on the show where he does feel the strain that his body, how do you say it? The mouth is writing checks that the body can't cash. He isn't able to keep up anymore because he is getting a little bit up there in years. And then with Martin Riggs, you would think that Clayne Crawford was walking into a no-win scenario here. How does anybody possibly play such a beloved old character like as it was performed by Mel Gibson in the 4 Lethal Weapon movies? And Clayne has shown me the way you do it is to respect what came before you. Don't reinvent the wheel, but explore other avenues that weren't explored before. I think that's the best way to approach a reboot character like this. And that's partly to do with Clayne, the way he plays it, and it's also partly to do with the writers of the show. One of the things they never really got into in the movies was Riggs dealing with the passing of his wife. There were scenes like where Riggs is suicidal and he wants to put a gun in his mouth, or he's just putting himself in situations where he's trying to get killed by the bad guys. And that happens in the show as well. Riggs in the show does that constantly as well. But what he gets to do in the show that he didn't get to do in the movies is they give him time to sit in that lonely camper, that mobile motorhome, and dwell and suffer and lament. So in a big budget Hollywood movie, especially one written by someone like Shane Black, you need a lot of explosions and gunfire, car chases, and there just isn't time. Sometimes there are those little moments in the movies, but for the most part, time is money. So they don't have time to explore like they did in this show. So one of my favorite parts about this show was that it took the character of Riggs and it really fleshed him out. There was so much potential that hadn't been tapped in the movies, and I just love that the writers of the show said, we're going to explore how Riggs deals with losing his wife. And it's not going to be exactly like they did with The Punisher and Frank Castle. It's similar in that it's really affecting his day-to-day life more and more as time goes by. And I do like the similarities between the two characters, where Riggs will just instinctively go into soldier mode, just like Frank. One little nice touch that I like that Clayne added was when Riggs is walking, he holds his pistol like a soldier would hold an assault rifle. Like he points it down close to him. Cops don't carry their guns like that, especially actors pretending to be cops on TV shows. So I thought that was fantastic. And he's also definitely got the acting chops to play a tortured soul. That's what Riggs really is. Mel Gibson played it one way with the crazy eyes and the whoop, 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 Three Stooges type of routine. Just complete out there Andy Kaufman type of nut job. Clayne Crawford plays it as a Southern gentleman, kind of. He's still got the zany side, the loose cannon side, but he's got that Southern drawl. The character's from Texas now. And the mustache, I wasn't sure about it at first, but I have to applaud Clayne Crawford for bringing back the 80s mustache. There's so few actors, especially in his age range today, who would rock the mustache on a big TV show like this. And, Riggs had his mullet, and this Riggs on the TV show has his mustache. And I think that's another big thing to think about when looking at Lethal Weapon, the TV show, that it's not only a great homage to the Lethal Weapon movie series, it's an homage to all 80s shows. There were a few shows in the 80s that were based on movies that came out, and most of them tanked. They were just awful. They weren't very successful. But I think one thing you can say about most of those shows, if not all of them, that came out in the 80s, TV shows like Blue Thunder or Starman, is that they really, really stuck to the movie's tone and rules. They didn't have, well, we're going to reimagine this. They couldn't because the movie was a huge hit. It had just come out a year before. And that's what people wanted, more of the feel of the movie. And that's what, to me, Lethal Weapon is. It's as if Lethal Weapon had become a TV show in the 80s, not in today. So a lot of the technology of today, cell phones are in the show, but they're not predominant. A lot of the movement in the show, they hoof it. They're driving around, they're running around. They're actually physically going places instead of constantly talking on cell phones, which is a big nitpick of mine in movies and TV today. I think cell phones really take away a lot of the tension that used to be there before the invention of the cell phone. And even though the show is about a cop who loses his wife, who was pregnant at the time with his baby, and there is quite a bit of violence in the show. I think every single intro before the Lethal Weapon title comes up, someone gets killed. So even though there is quite a bit of violence in the show, it's a fun show. I mean, they don't take any of it all that seriously. It really perfectly matches the tone and the vibe of the movies, where there would be brutal violence in the movies as well, but then there'd be Riggs doing a Three Stooges routine, and Roger would be doing something funny. So I think they did a great job of having it be an action show, having it have a lot of bullets flying, car chases, explosions, and yes, people do get killed in this as well. It's violent, but it is not anything that I think will scar a child. It's not Saw type of grotesque stuff. People aren't getting tortured and tormented. There's no sexual violence, rape, anything like that, molestation. It really does feel like they're adhering to the tone and the atmosphere of 80s movies and TV shows. And the chemistry between Damon Wayans and Clayne Crawford is fantastic. The show would have fallen apart after one episode if those two actors didn't work well together. And I think that their on-screen chemistry is fantastic. There's so much like Mel and Danny. They bicker, but I think even more than in the movies, they're tighter. They're more like brothers in the show than they were in the movies. There was a bond between Riggs and Murtaugh in the movies, obviously, but I think that these two actors in the show have, I hesitate to say, have done it better because time always tells, and there hasn't been enough time. But I really feel like this version of Martin and Roger are more like brothers and love each other, even though they won't always admit it, than they were in the movies. In the movies, they bicker a lot, and they do work together, but I feel like in the show they are much more of a cohesive team. There's much more teamwork, where one does something to set up the other one. They plan together more. They work well together more instead of butting heads and then just through sheer luck saving the day somehow. So if you're a Lethal Weapon fan, I highly recommend it. And if you're a fan of The Punisher on Netflix, this might be an unusual recommendation, but I see a lot of things from The Punisher in this show as well. This is obviously a brighter, more fun show. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The colors are vibrant. It's very well filmed, great camera work. It's not dark and gritty like The Punisher, but it is a character exploration of a widowed male who has extensive military training, and what happens to a man when he loses the thing that he loves and holds dearest in the world. It is a very interesting study of what happens to that man when all he has left is his training. And there's a saying in the military, Charlie Mike, which means continue mission. And I think both shows do a fantastic job of showing you that when a guy is a soldier right to the core, right to the heart, that no matter what he goes through, no matter how difficult it is, he'll always Charlie Mike. The thing that's heartwarming about Lethal Weapon, though, is that Martin Riggs gets by with a little help from his friends, and that's one of the nicest things about the show. Seeing the Murtaugh family take him in, accept him, not just as Murtaugh's partner, but as a family member, just like in the movies. And for fans of Leo Getz from the movies, played by Joe Pesci, yes, Leo does appear in the Lethal Weapon TV show, but again, they took it in kind of a different direction. He's not the sawed-off runt, annoying, quick-talking, yappy little kind of chihuahua type of guy. He's a lawyer in the show. It's a different performance, but he's still got that essence of being an annoying, lovable little idiot. He's not as bombastic as Joe Pesci, but by the end of the episode, I gave this TV version of Leo Getz my approval. TV Leo gets you off. That's Lethal Weapon Season 1. Got a comment? Scroll down and go to town. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon page listed in the show notes. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmaste.